You are already famous. Okay, and we're live. As part of the National Association of Realtors, I'm here to make some remarks. I'm Taz, a scientist at the Media Lab. Law.MIT.edu is my shtick, and we just heard a very compelling, I think, presentation about a good idea for how to recombobulate the real estate industry so it's a well-functioning market by using a platform as the organizing process by which to bring the buyers and the sellers and the intermediaries together in a rational, machinable way. It makes all kinds of sense. Part of the idea, and it's a preliminary idea still to some extent, was to use a provider that's called Platform OS. So I Googled Platform OS just to see, and it does look at a high level like functionally adequate for what you're saying. And because it's law.MIT.edu, and part of what we do is try to think about engineering the legal aspect so it supports and reflects the business dimension of the project and the technology that's being used. I scroll down to proprietary rights, and it says under this agreement, Platform OS, which is a company, owns all right, title, and interest in and to the services and documentation, blah, 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 blah. And then there's some rights that are reserved to people that are putting stuff on their platform. Some of the examples were, could it be like YouTube in some way or like eBay in some way? These are platforms that are sense makers for their environments and their markets. It could be, but of course, we always have to bear in mind, well, who owns the platform? So the concept of a platform makes all kinds of sense at that layer of the stack of the technology and what people see. Another layer of the stack, you could say, in a business sense, is that legal part. I think I'm joined by Thomas from MIT, and one thing that he brought up earlier was some of this isn't so much of a technology problem. I mean, there's technology involved, and it has to be got right, but there's people and relationships and incumbents and so forth. So one of the things that it calls to mind is who would be the coalition, or if you will, of the players that could get together initially to get the thing going, and what would their relationship be to the platform provider? Is a good word. They're a provider of a service. Maybe it would be one where they created according to open standards and more flexible technology capabilities that can be served by, say, Platform OS as an example, but are not created in a way where they're inextricably tied for all time and they're kind of subject to perhaps the changing decisions and whims and survival decisions of that platform, but could be swapped to different technology. That would be one way to look at the sort of legal and governance layer of sizing up and selecting the right technology. I'm sure this is all like kids. In some ways, you can't see the room, but we've got very seasoned, experienced people in the industry here. But it doesn't go without saying. So I wanted to highlight that partly as a segue into a few remarks I wanted to make, and I want to highlight on that legal dimension for using technology to help transition the real estate industry. I want to put out there that I think identity might be the single most important thing to get right in order to enable this kind of fabulous vision of a platform and services and a functioning market that works. When I started, when I was little, my dad had a company for 20 years called Custom Column Service, and it was an advertising company. And he wrote little kind of ads that local professionals could put in the local newspaper to advertise themselves. So like insurance, dentists, and fun facts. He's a great writer about dentists, taking your kids to the dentist for the first time. What is a crown? And real estate was the major thing. So you're getting ready to sell your house. What does it mean to stage it? How do you find someone to help, a broker? How do you, basic things about the API, and then he'd sell them to brokers mostly and agents who would buy like 13 at a time, put their picture on it and their name, and put it in their local paper. This fundamentally was an identity service, and it was inextricably tied to location. So he had this concept that for every town that he sold it to, he was an exclusive, and for at least one municipality around as a buffer, would not sell that same column so that people wouldn't see the same thing. And he sold an exclusive that was geographically based, to an industry that couldn't be more geographically based. So I think looking forward, and then later when I was in law school, the way I kind of paid bills and, you know, buy beer and stuff was title searches. So I just did tons of title searches. It's a whole thing. We were just talking about in Massachusetts and Suffolk County, Middlesex. If you go way back, pre-Revolutionary War, you've got these dusty leather-bound volumes with this homespun way to talk about the property boundaries. It's not so different today. It's still terribly messed up to just identify what location we're talking about. It's idiosyncratic, the jurisdiction and to the vendor. You know, fast forward a little bit, I was working as a counsel in state government for technology, and we had a big effort in the late 90s for GIS, Geographic Information Systems. We were flying planes over the Commonwealth and other New England states, and it's happening around the country just to make sure we could have, like, you know, unique designators for all of the land, for assessment and for natural resource and everything else. And then fast forward a little more, I come to MIT on a part-time basis in the 99, and I was in the Department of Architecture. All the research was, again, inextricably tied to places. So based on some of that background, I was thrilled when Bill invited me in 2015 to collaborate on this event. He said, DAZA, and we collaborated before. He's an MIT alum, runs Real Estate Cafe. The realtors are coming to Boston in 2018. Everybody's going to be here. This is our shot to kind of really convene people. And so probably 10 times at different hackathons and different classes, when Bill's been here, I've kind of said, and here's Bill, and Bill, who's coming to town in 2018? And the realtors. And so we've been pumping this thing for years, and I've had time to think about it. And this is what I want to say. I think for identity, it would be useful to think about three things. The parcel, if you will, or like lat long, the property, you know, let's just say the built stuff, and the people, because they all start with P. Okay, that's why. And if you think about what identity means in those layers, there's always going to be three kind of things. A unique identifier of any type, but don't forget the word unique. I just learned an anecdote that in one of the states, the assessors identifier, the county assessors, which is the de facto standard for unique identifiers, one of the states, which shall remain nameless unless you email me, it was recycling the numbers. So like if somebody kind of reads, it's brutal. And so like, oh my God. So you can't do that with the thinking like, oh, well, nobody looks back, who cares? Like, this is not systems thinking. So at the technology layer, got to be truly unique identifiers that make sense. I think another thing is the kind of, in a sense, almost like the role, if you will. So something that is, that makes sense in context. For example, it may relate in the case of a built property to, you know, how is it zoned? Oh, this is a commercial thing, it's an industrial thing, residential thing. In the case of people, it's a buyer, it's a seller, it's a broker, it's a title insurer, and name. You know, things have names as well. All of them don't, but people have names like John and Sally. Some properties certainly have named the name of the mall. So it's the Geneva Convention busts it down. If you're a prisoner of war, the three things you have to say are name, rank, and serial number. These are the core identifiers, I would say, that feed into an identity system that can function. But you kind of had me at unique identifier. If we can just get a unique identifier, you can stick metadata on, and that can float as it needs to over time. So let's fast forward a little bit. OpenStreetMap is something that I think is a good example of a direction to go, where there's something where, you know, Google is great, don't get me wrong, but something where being beholden to a single vendor is fragile, especially for such an essential sector of the economy as real estate, or for any sector of the economy or core public sector function. Having a little bit of distance there that you can map to and give you some flexibility to fail back to other vendors or have competition, or do it your own way if things unfold such that the real estate industry wants to go one way and others go another way. OpenStreetMap's good. Fast forward a little more, now come the days of blockchain. And there's a project I think many of you haven't heard of, apparently, just in chit-chatting with a few of you, called Foam. Just show a hand, who's heard of Foam?
today, I heard.
Okay, so 2.5. So to just give you a quick sense of that, foam is a protocol for a consensus-driven map of the world, if you will, and blockchain's involved. They have some other ideas, but the big insight from that is every square meter of space on Earth, on our planet, has a short, human-readable alphanumeric. So it's completely unique. It's disambiguated from any other, and not capable of self-inflicted harm like some people in the back office someday saying, "Oh, we'll just kind of recycle them," or do other funny, odd things that conflicting them with the namespace in another place, or all the other stuff we can do, or changing the like the format or the standard or the data structure from time to time. And it covers the entire Earth, which is a good way to think from the beginning, so that it will work for a country and its borders change and all the other stuff. So take a look at foam if you haven't seen it yet. It's a good example of how to start to grapple with identity. Why bother? Well, when I see presentations like the one we just saw about how to reconceive in a rational and productive, actionable way of the real estate industry, like looking at what kind of platform could make sense of this, what I started thinking about is what cool stuff could you do? And so you can always shave money off, and that's critical, and that's probably good enough. But part of what's exciting, I think, from a Media Lab perspective, is new types of business models, new types of relationships that could occur in a more robust, dynamic innovation layer that could grow up around this. We heard as an example an apps economy. That would be great. One type of interaction that that Bill taught me actually many years ago, and I guess sources from Doc Searles and his vendor relationship management stuff, is called intent casting. Who's heard of intent casting? Okay, a couple people. Of course, Thomas. So the basic idea is, what if? So right now, everything's kind of based on the seller. So the seller has property, and they want to sell it. They find brokers, and the whole kind of industry, the MLS and everything else, is based on trying to get out there and find buyers. Are you interested in a single family dwelling right here? How about you? Let's pamphlets and emails and flyers, and you name it. What if instead
attention economy versus intention economy?
What if we were attention versus intention, for those of you on the other side of the mic? So what if, so that's a good one. So what if we could start with where the money is, the buyers, just as an example, or get them more involved? We have some buyers brokers here. So in a system where we dealt at the design phase with identity in a rational, scalable way, where people could have unique identities even as they change jobs and change locations, and even as platforms change or as you interoperate with different services. One thing you could get potentially is people being able to list their purchase interest, to broadcast their intent. My family might be interested in finding a single family dwelling within thus far of a school and this type of situation. So you're discoverable by sellers. That could be huge in terms of just that one design component difference within an interoperable set of services, and certainly within a platform, could revolutionize the industry in terms of efficiency. You have to have supply and demand find each other. Half of that equation is the buyers, and engineering for them could be big. Fiduciaries for data too is a critical thing. Thomas will talk more about this, but I've worked for the last 3 years with credit unions, looking at ways that they, as fiduciaries to their members, could also offer a type of service where you could put your personal data there, as well as your money. That seems to be supported within the federally chartered scope of their regulations. They do that to some extent now. If there's a place where people could have their data, more information about them, where they own and control it, and could in a authorized, tracked, legit way make it available to buyers agents and to sellers agents and to others that are looking, kind of across a sector, that could be huge as well. So responsible use of personal data and well-engineered systems are critical. And I think at the bottom of all that is a sense of open standards and a sense of and solving for identity on day one. So I certainly hope the PUID project, which is kind of what we started with in 2015, when I said, Bill, I'm behind this thing you're going to do when the realtors come to town. I hope it finds life. I hope it finds purchase, so that it's a property unique identifier. So that was one thing that we could get right as a result of all the efforts coming next with the digital transformation of the real estate industry. That alone, I genuinely think could allow for a lot of mileage and for a lot of beneficial reform and a more rational market that serves everybody much better. So with that, I'm happy to chat a little bit or go right to the next person. And let me just take this podcast off the air.